All right, what's up, world? Welcome again to another edition of I Mix What I Like. I mixwhatilike.org, at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. And today we're having what I'm very happy to be hosting, a conversation with Danae Martinez, who joins us to discuss an essay she shared recently titled Why I Am Not an Afro-Pessimist. Martinez, among many other things, is an activist and a professor of Africana and ethnic studies, and we welcome her to the show. Welcome, Danae, to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to start with, there's been a lot of flurry around the concept of Afro-Pessimism, and you wrote in your piece here, and particularly around the work of Dr. Frank Wilderson, who we've done a lot with ourselves and is somewhat well known in certain circles. But in your essay, and this is where I really wanted us to start, you said, "It is interesting to me how people seem to have such a strong reaction to Afro-pessimism. I have never seen it against the ideologies that I hold dear, including Pan-Africanism, anti-capitalism, anti-homophobia, anti-patriarchy, etc., that ground me in the work I do for Black liberation. It only feeds it and gives me more tools to help my students, my kids, myself, and others to understand what we are seeing when we see it," end quote. So what is Afro-pessimism as you've come to conceive it, and why aren't you one?
Okay. Well, as I understand it, it's a framework for understanding what we're seeing and thinking about revolution and what that's going to actually mean for Black people specifically, not at the expense of other people, right? But more thinking about how do we get our freedom? Because just like women have issues, you know, that they need to get their freedom, and we all are anti-capitalist and all of that kind of stuff, that, you know, we also need to consider ourselves and our freedom and consider the ways in which different people in society might be against that freedom. That's how I see Afro-pessimism. And then he said, why did I say I'm not one?
Well, yeah, because your piece is titled that you're not one. And as someone pointed out, you know, when they read the piece, you don't really explain why you're not one. They don't understand how it is that you're not one, because it seems as a defense of Afro-pessimism.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't read all of the literature, you know, the constraints of capitalism, being an adjunct faculty, trying to raise 4 kids by myself, right? And the fact that a lot of it is really like high level stuff. And so I just haven't had the time to fully be able to say that, you know, I've read it all and I totally understand every aspect of it, right? And I'm not one of the architects of it. I'm not one of the people who's writing and constantly talking about it. But I see its usefulness, and I'm unclear, or I have some ideas about why people are having such a reaction to it, because some of the stuff that I'm seeing is just outrageous, you know, and so I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm still learning. I'm a baby in it.
Well, that's what I actually appreciated in the essay that you wrote. You know, a long, you know, piece, relatively speaking, for some writing these days, and you personalize it a little bit to sort of situate and explain. But what I really appreciate about what you were saying is just that point that, look, this thing is new itself. It is a bit dense. It is very challenging. But it's not something that I think should be so quickly dismissed. And what I see happening in some of the criticism that is publicly disseminated. Particularly, it seems for the most part, particular to Frank, to Wilderson's work. But it, to me, is clear that they haven't read his work and haven't grappled with his work. And I reject and in particular, this is maybe a sort of separate issue. This is where I start to feel like we fall into where I think there is an important divide and difference between journalism and academia, where journalistically there can be a shorter time dealt with in delivering an idea, and within academia, there's more room. There's somewhat similar standards of peer review and whatever, but it's a little more strenuous, a little more extended. There's a little more room to breathe. There's more arguments that are able to be had in the academic realm. And journalistically, I see a lot of pot shots being taken, a lot of quick paragraph reads, and then they reduce it, and I'll finally stop here and ask you to respond. They reduce it to, I just hear Afro-Pessimists being, about giving up. We can't win. We have no allies. Everybody hates Black people. And let's just, forget it. Where there's no value to materialism and class struggle. And I'm just quitting. And when I read it, and particularly Frank's work, I get a very different reaction. I have a very different reaction personally. I don't get one of let's quit it all. I get one of, okay, let's reassess how the world is set up and get back in the fight, maybe even more strenuously. But please, I'm sorry, go ahead. And
No, I totally agree with you. And that's what makes me so angry. And one of the things is and it's not just journalists, by the way, it's even academics who do the same stuff, right? And I do feel like there must be some kind of emotional reaction that happens that they just outright want to reject it. And first of all, I want to say I don't fault emotion. I know that that's what white supremacy does. You're not supposed to have emotions about your freedom and stuff like that, right? So I don't. It needs to be there, but to a certain extent, have such a strong reaction where you will bend and have to actually lie about what Frank and others are saying. It tells you that something else is going on there, right? And that you need to pay attention to it. And I think that even, I talk about my molest and the things that happened to me. I've been in a lot of counseling and therapy and stuff like that. And one of the things they teach you is that when you have a strong reaction, you got to sit back and say, what's that about? Right. And I feel like people aren't doing the emotional labor that they need to do in order to get to a point where it's not just about who has the only answer. Right? I kind of call it a more revolutionary than thou kind of attitude, where I feel like what I feel like some of the Marxists are doing and different people are doing is that they're saying everybody's trying to be in their own silos, and that prevents us from working together and all of that kind of stuff. When in actuality, I feel what happens is with some of what they're doing is they're attacking any other group that they think has that thinks that they have an oppression to deal with. And then they say, well, and they make it a competition. It's kind of funny because that's what capitalism does, makes everything a competition. And they're Marxists, so you would think they would have that analysis. But the thing is it's this competition. And it's not a competition against people who want to take our freedom away. It's against other radicals on the left who have another perspective. And they're I need to be the only perspective and everybody else just shut up. And I've seen it happen over and over again with different things that say, when you get on Facebook or when you try to talk to people and they say these things, different things about Afro-Pessimism, and then you say to them, hey, where did you get that? Where in the literature does it say that? How come you're getting this feeling? Man, they almost always become quiet, or they won't answer you. They won't give you a quote. They won't respond to you. They won't. And the thing is he directly says, I'm against Marxism. That's a quote from, I believe, your show. And the thing is, it's so dishonest and irresponsible because it's not even the highfalutin stuff that says that. It's the interviews that you can Google say specifically, I'm not against Marxism. I'm not against, intersectionality and all these different types of things, right? It's there in the literature.
At the break, we had The question, or what you were talking about, what you were responding to this point that people often demonstrate what they have not read. I was thinking of John Henrik Clarke and his line, and when he was debating, he was saying, every time you talk, you demonstrate what you have not read. Yes. And it feels that way in a lot of the critiques that we see. And just quickly, since we paused, I do want to say that what I meant to be saying more, that because I know academics make the same mistake, and what I was just trying to say was that it was more the journalistic method versus the academic method, not so much journalists versus academics. And that method of, where in journalism it's even taught, just, you can read 10 things real quick and then you have enough to put your story together. You can read one, story and you have enough to do an interview. Where in academia, the process is supposed to be a little more rigorous, a little more challenging, and with more room to lay out arguments. For instance, as you were just discussing, what have you read that leads you to your conclusion? And then how is it, and in what way are you demonstrating its insufficiency? Anyway, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that totally. And, but I even think the graduate school read is an issue, like I hated the graduate school read when I was in graduate school because I didn't get to really fully, digest it. And the
Quickly
way
break that down for those who may not understand what you mean. Yeah.
That read that you say you read something, but you really read the introduction and the conclusion and a few points in between, but you didn't really fully read it and get exactly what's going on. So you miss a whole lot of what the person is, or the author is actually trying to say, right? And so that's why it's so frustrating to me, because I feel like some of the stuff is directly there. If you just look there, and the one that really bothers me is that Afro-Pessimism is about resignation, that there's no project or anything that is just like, what, we're never going to be free and that's it. The whole point of Afro-Pessimism and even the idea of pessimism is not forget it, let's just give up. It's that in this current system, or in this current what we know of the world, there's no way that we're going to be able to get our freedom or get included, that we have to actually destroy the world. There's nothing about that. And he says it, like, even that's the title of what you have it listed on your show. He says it. They're all very clear about that. And they're locating themselves within Chris Hani, South Africa, the BLA, Harriet Tubman. The people that they're listing are not people who weren't doing anything about what was going on, right? And so I think it's important that people understand that's not how it goes. And the other thing is, like, the other thing I hear is, like, there's no agency, right? No, what they're doing is they're attempting to give you a framework to see what's going on. And that, it's not that they're against Marxism or against feminism or against all of those things, but rather that that's not going to be enough. Right. And that gives you agency. He even says, look, we might unite with them to take down capitalism and to take down patriarchy. But at the end of all that, we may have to battle them if they're so interested in not thinking about Black people and Black people's freedom. And so you got to keep that in mind as you're moving forward. And the way that I kind of explain it, I was talking to someone last night, the way that I kind of explained is that if you're a slave and someone is telling you, this is how you get to freedom, and they tell you, when you get to the blue house, everything's fine, you can take off your camouflage, put your guns away, start to live your life. But then another homie on the side comes and says, yo, actually, I know that's what they're saying, but I've heard, and if you look at the pattern of things that have gone so far, I've heard that when you get there, it's not really all the way freedom for you. It maybe is freedom for them. And therefore, be careful. Don't take off your camouflage. Don't take off your gun, and be ready to go back. Maybe the people who actually that you don't need to protect yourself. Those might actually be your kidnappers. So you might need to push on a little bit further. That's agency, to be able to say, when you get there, watch your back, because we're not sure, according to all the things that have happened up until this time, that everybody is down for your freedom. I appreciate that. I want that. I don't want anybody telling me, absolutely, you know what, when we get there, we're all free. And if we decide to talk about your issue of being Black, we might. If we decide to talk about your issue of being a woman, we might. We might get to it if we feel like it. That's not agency.
Yeah, I hear you. It's very well said, and in fact, I think we should just probably leave it there, because unfortunately, time is not on at least my side. And unpacking what you just said would just open up a whole series of other doors. But I just do agree, and I think in the basic sense that they have not, or I have not read what I've read and interpreted Afro-Pessimism to mean there's no agency, we must quit. I have not interpreted it to mean that Marxism or other approaches are without value, just that, as Fanon and Césaire and others, that they, again, as you point out, locate themselves within, have said it's not sufficient. And we need to break down these structures. And again, to quote that line from Frank, I'm not against police brutality. I'm against the police.
Yes.
The critique of the institution. That's not to say let's give in to the police and just accept all the violence and beatings. It's saying we need to reevaluate our relationship to these institutions, and there are limitations elsewhere. But I appreciate what you did, because you offered up a very honest and very personal extended criticism. We're going to link to it at I Mix What I Like. Because and you also, not just that you offered a critique, but you, in a very personal investigation, but that you encouraged more investigation and others to do the same without just dismissing something without clearly having dealt with it appropriately. And I just appreciate you for that and many other things. And I can't wait for us to link up again. Thank you very much.
Yes, can I just make one more point?
Please.
The thing is, if I'm really about Black freedom, it is my duty, my obligation to consider perspectives that might illuminate where there's going to be obstacles. That's my duty. If I'm really about that life, if I really want my kids, their kids to get free, that's my obligation, to not dismiss that. Even if I don't necessarily agree with it, I have to at least look at it and think of it as a possibility and be able to get ready for that. That's strategy. And so it's important to me, and that's why I wrote that piece. It's important to me to for us to consider what might stand in our way and be ready for it, because I'm about winning, not just about getting better. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no question. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to all of you who are watching and commenting. Be in touch with us at imixwhatilike.org, at imixwhatilike for all your relevant social media. And Danae, as Fred Hampton used to say, I know it applies to you because you are clearly willing to fight for that peace that you want. So thank you again for joining us, and peace to you.
All right, peace.
I mix what I like.